Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a very, very special episode of the Locker Room Show. I'm your host, Haider, and I will be joined by my co-host, Nabeel Hashmi. But our guest today is someone who's really, really special. It's Dr. Zafar Iqbal, popularly known as Dr. Zaf, who has been working with multiple, Premier League clubs, and he's presently working with the Crystal Palace team. And I'm really excited about this show because this gives us an opportunity to discuss with him the present circumstances, the exceptional circumstances that are there, and football being played under those circumstances, and what else we can discuss. We'll see as the conversation moves along. So, Dr. Zaf, welcome to the show. Hope everything is fine at your end.
Assalamu alaikum and Jazakallah for inviting me. Yes, no, it's good. It's like yesterday's result.
Excellent. And we also have with us Nabeel Hashmi. Nabeel, who has been battling with Karachi Electric for the last, I would like to say 2 years or so, talking about the various load shedding issues that he's facing. So, Nabeel, do you think we'll be able to get through this show without any electricity issues?
I think otherwise it's not just me now. A lot of people are coming out, and even the posh areas are now suffering because of it. Like 30 hours load shedding, 40 hours load shedding. I mean, that's insane. So I think it's just something that you need to speak out.
Okay, so Nabeel, we're with you in this cause. So best of luck handling Karachi Electric. Dr. Zaf, I'm going to start off with the present pandemic situation, right? You were working to ensure that Premier League returns, and congratulations to you. You and your team have done a wonderful job. I believe you were the point person, on the panel as well to see how best, you can make the game safe on its return. So talk to us a bit about that, because when all of this was put on hold in March, right, things seemed really, really bleak. So can you tell me the issues or the challenges that you faced in bringing football back?
So I was fortunate in the sense that we had a group of doctors as part of the Premier League medical panel who got together and tried to see if we can get football to return. And the main reason for it, there was a lot of, how can I put it, resistance to it initially by the public. Why are we returning to football? It's only sport. There are far more important things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, life needs to go on. There was a huge amount of money that was involved as well, because companies like BT and Sky had paid a huge amount of money to broadcast the remaining games. And also the issue, we had to complete the season because the issues regarding relegation and which teams were going to win the title, that had to be completed as well. So there was initial resistance from the public perception as to whether we should be returning back to sport. And then the main issue was, can we make the environment safe for players to return? Because ultimately the players have got to feel comfortable that this is a safe environment for them to return in. And so the way that we dealt with that was we would be in regular contact with the players. So initially lots of Zoom calls, so while they're at home, they're maintaining their fitness. And then as we were gathering more facts from around the world in terms of how we could return people back to the training ground, then we would pass that information on to the players. So we would keep in contact with the players. My main thing was to ensure that the training ground had to be the safest place, not only for the players, but also for the staff as well. So as we discussed with the government as well, so it was on another panel as well with the sports working group advising the government as well. And in collaboration, once we felt that it was safe for us to be going outside, then it was safe to do exercise in the park, then we tried to transfer that to the training ground. And so again, we would have regular talks with the players, again ensuring them that their safety is paramount, and only when they are comfortable would they be able to return. So we formulated a plan where there would be a phased return. So it's in 5 stages. So the first stage is that you return to the training ground, but with social distancing, so that you're not near another player. So you can still do some exercise, but you're not going to pick anything up from another player. The next stage was to return to training, but with social distancing removed, so they were closer together. And then the third stage, which is where we're at now, is playing behind closed doors. And so all those stages we had to do, we had to put additional measures in. So as well as making sure that the environment was as clean and safe as possible, all the players and staff would be tested twice a week at least. So that's with the COVID PCR test, which tells you if you are positive or negative. Um, and so every club in the Premier League had to abide by that, and we would use exactly the same test, exactly the same type of testing technique, so that one team didn't see that they had an advantage over another. And then again, having regular talks with the players and medical specialists to reassure the players that if anyone was concerned, that one, they didn't have to come back to training until they were fully satisfied. And throughout, we would make sure that the players' safety was paramount, and that football, returning to games, wasn't going to start until we'd gone through these stages and everyone was comfortable with that. And alhamdulillah, I think if you look at how we've gone through the process, initially there were players that were concerned. There was lots of reports about players from black and minority ethnic groups that were really concerned about an increased risk in those. So again, we had to try and reassure those people. So we, again, by step, trying to create a completely safe bubble in which when they come to the training ground, only those people that had been tested twice a week, that were clear, that were doing a daily symptom check and temperature check, were allowed in that bubble. And again, that provided further reassurance for the players that this is going to be the safest environment outside their home to actually to be able to continue with their work. And alhamdulillah, it's worked fine. Going through the stages has been fine. It has been a lot of work, lots of meetings, lots of stress trying to change the training ground. And in our case, our training ground is quite small. So we're quite lucky. We're next to Kent Cricket Ground's training ground. So we were able to use their facilities as well. So again, things like training, working in the gym, because we had more space, we were able to make the players feel more reassured. We slowly reintroduced things. So initially, players would come in, they would have showers at home, they would come in with their kit, they would literally train on the pitch, and then they would go straight home. So we wouldn't allow them to do showers, we wouldn't allow them to do get changed at the training ground. We wouldn't even give them food at the training ground, because the main reason was to try and reassure them that we're controlling everything. So we know that the virus, it is much less likely to be picked up outside. And that's a combination because of the wind. It's not settling down on any hard surfaces. And also the UV light can break down COVID as well. And this is all information we've gathered from some of the leading experts around the world. So by reassuring players that you can train on the training ground, nobody's getting any increased risk of infection. Only once they were reassured by that, then we make the groups more tight, so into more normal type training. Once we'd gone through that and again showed that there was no increased risk of infection, we then slowly introduced food. So initially food was introduced by being made outside, and it was brought in special packages, and that was handed to each individual player in their car. And once again, a couple of weeks of that, once the players felt comfortable, then we brought the chefs in who were also tested, and they then provided food. And again, at all times, there's always somebody from the Premier League who is there checking to make sure that we're complying with this, and that nobody is breaking the rules, and that player safety is paramount. And once you got the players on board, alhamdulillah, everything else followed on from that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because they are the biggest stakeholders in this entire exercise. I mean, in addition to the coaching staff and production staff, so on and so forth. But Nabeel, I'm going to let you ask Dr. Zaf a follow-up here, and then I'll come back. So if there's anything that you want to proceed with, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, the way I just wanted to ask Dr. Zafar, like initially there were reports like people like Aguero, they had their reservation and they didn't want to turn up at the training ground. So like you said that all the protocols were followed to ensure that the players were mentally relaxed to get into the ground. Now that the Premier League is up and running, are those protocols being strictly followed there or not?
Yes. So at the training ground and at the stadium still, we still have the measures where everybody's being tested twice a week before a player even turns up at the training ground. So we have an app, a COVID app, and it has a symptom questionnaire which they have to fill in before they can get out of the car. Each player we've given a thermometer, so they have to check their temperature, and then once they complete the app, it produces a green screen, which means go, that you can get out your car. They have to show that to me or one of my colleagues, and only then are they allowed out of the car. Once they're in the training ground, each player is given a plastic box in which they have their drinks, they have their kit. So again, we're trying to reduce transmission of passing anything around. And again, inside, they have to wear masks. I've got this on, so we're wearing our snuds. And we're making sure that at all times that people are wearing gloves. So the doctors and the physios are wearing gloves the whole time to, again, make sure that everyone is feeling safe and reduce as much as possible the risk. Even to the extent of, even when they're on the pitches, we try and minimize contact between players. We use the GPS for that. So there is some evidence that if you are less than 15 minutes outside within 2 meters of another person, the chance of you picking something up is very low. So we use GPS to make sure that players are aware that they can't be within 2 meters of another person. So again, we remind players of that. Every day I'm sending messages out. Yes, your results are good, but please keep going with regards to the hygiene. Because look, this is a new disease. There's still a lot we need to learn from it. But I think we have shown that we can work with it. It's a new way of living. And unfortunately, the thing that we have found with it is that young, healthy, fit people, most of them recover. Where it really causes a problem is the elderly. But at the same time, we should still be all protecting each other. We don't want anybody getting this. And so, as I said, the players, alhamdulillah, have all bought into this, and nobody really has been, disobeying the rules. Yes, you'll hear of odd occasions, people having haircuts or not socially distancing, but those cases are far few in between. And if that does happen, then they get punished.
Okay, so you mentioned the application. I mean, is this an application which sort of like is being generally used, or is it just something which Crystal Palace is using? So that's part one of my question. Part two is that obviously some people have tested positive, some athletes have tested positive and have returned to the field of play. How has COVID-19 actually impacted them? I mean, have we been able to truly assess the impact of this infection on the players, or is it still something which we're learning every day?
Okay, so the first one in terms of the app. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a working group, and so one of my colleagues in the working group from another club had already been using an app from a different company, and I thought about, rather than doing questionnaires on a piece of paper on a daily basis, why not do it via an app? So I spoke with one of my other colleagues, and they were doing something similar. We got together and just created this app. It's very, very simple. It just literally is like 10 questions, and they just have to, they can say no symptoms, or they have to click on whatever other symptoms they have. They have to input their temperature, and then, as I said, it either gives you a green or a red pass. If it's a red pass, you're not allowed out your car, and then I have to go and have a conversation with them via the phone. So that, to be honest, it's very straightforward. It's a good way of recording for every single player, and it reminds.
So it's a basic questionnaire. Then primarily, it's a basic questionnaire.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Fair enough.
Exactly. And then the second question in terms of athletes returning. Now, as far as I'm aware, and I'm also on the panel regarding reviewing anyone with positive results, the majority, I think almost every result that we've had, any positive tests that we've had, and there have been very few, we've done thousands of tests, and we've done nearly 800 tests at our club over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and alhamdulillah, so far we've not had anybody who's tested positive on that. At other clubs, we have had some people who've tested positive, but they've all been asymptomatic.
Okay.
And so what we then do is that we know that people can be asymptomatic carriers, but they still then have to either isolate for 7 days or they will have further testing. All our players will have had blood tests. So we got baselines. So if anybody does test positive, they may have further blood tests just to make sure that, that they're not showing any signs of inflammation or any other signs of illness. And all our players will have had a cardiac screen as well. And again, because there has been a small percentage in people who have ended up in hospital, and I must remind you, this isn't athletes, this is the general population and mainly the elderly who have had something called myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart. And so they've had that when they've gone into hospital with COVID. So rather than take that risk with our athletes, and again, to reassure them, all our players, we have annual screening anyway, cardiac screen. Before they return to football this time, we got them all to have a cardiac screen anyway. And if anybody was to have any symptoms or a positive test, they would have a repeat cardiac screen before they return to sport. And if they were returning to sport, again, it would be a gradual return, especially if they'd had symptoms. So there have been protocols put in place so that if somebody does come back, then it'll be a gradual return, and make sure as long as they're not getting any issues, any heart issues, any breathing issues, then they just progress along that ladder and return to sport. But as far as I'm aware, there's nobody that has had any issues having tested positive and returning back to sport so far.
Okay, so I apologize. I understand you probably have been addressing questions on COVID for the past 4 months nonstop, but it's just that the reason why I'm still continuing on this topic is because I want those who are tuning in and those who will get to see this episode later on, for them to get as educated as possible on this particular subject, and they're also aware of how much input and how much how much work has gone into bringing sports back. I mean, so just bear with me for a bit if you possibly can. We saw some really high profile footballers getting tested positive in other leagues. I mean, especially if you talk about Serie A, right? We saw some really big names getting tested positive there. So have you also, has there been some coordination just for the sake of sharing information and getting informed on this? Has there been coordination with those clubs and with leagues, with other leagues as well, or has it just been primarily Premier League experts working specifically keeping the conditions of UK in mind mostly, or has there been a broader coordination?
No, definitely, because I have colleagues who are working at German clubs and Spanish clubs. So I have good friends who are working at Barcelona and a few other Spanish clubs as well. And so they returned a couple of weeks before we did in terms of training. So of course, you use that expertise and the fact that they've got an advantage where they may have faced some problems in terms of their protocols, and we were able to learn from that. And also, we've been speaking with my colleagues over in the US, Australia, South Africa, all around the world, really, just sharing ideas, because this is obviously something that is affecting all sports, and we all want sports to return. So certainly, there's a lot that we can learn from each other. I've got literally hundreds of protocols from different clubs and different sports. And likewise, we've been sharing our ideas and experiences as well with anybody who wishes to ask. And in terms of the testing positive, it's quite complicated. There's no doubt that there will have been people who have had the condition and it may not have affected them. Certainly, if you're talking about young athletes, the majority of them may have had it, and who've actually tested positive may have had it and not had any real symptoms, and they've been able to return to sports without any issues. The few cases that you've been talking about in Italy and Spain and Germany, you've got to remember there's various factors. One, they may have had it and it's just passed through them. Secondly, you can get things like false positives and false negatives, and I don't want to go too much detail because I'm sure we could have 100 questions just on the the differences between the two. But so again, the issue is with regards to all you do if somebody is positive is you just isolate them for 7 days and then check them on a regular basis to make sure they don't have any issues when they return to sport. And then the other problem that you have is there's also the issue with regards to antibody testing, and that in itself can cause problems because it can tell you that you may have had it at some point, but it can show that you've got antibodies, but it doesn't really tell you if you're going to be immune to it because we don't know enough about it. So the main way of preventing this is hygiene advice, and this is what we tell everyone. The testing is there more for surveillance. We've probably got the largest group of people anywhere in the UK that is being tested while asymptomatic, because normally you only test when people are symptomatic. So this data is also going to be used by the government here in the UK so that they can shape their policy going forward. But the main thing is I keep reassuring the players, when you do the test, that only tells you what your result is at that moment in time. You can test negative, and then if you go in and act stupid and go and into a supermarket or whatever and not observing social distancing, or you're with other people who you don't know what their status is, that's how you're going to pick it up. So it's a new way of living for all the players. We have players now, they're not allowed to share cars. They all turn up individually in their Vianos. We're not allowed to use public transport, because until we get a better understanding of the disease, we've got to try and minimize risk as much as possible. So these footballers, they're coming in individually, they do their work, and then they go back home. Because our main priority is we have to finish this season. So we've got another couple of weeks left of this season, and then with regards to next season, we're going to review and reassess.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So it seems that as far as football is concerned, you guys have pretty much figured out the SOPs. Yes, it is something which we're continuing to learn about, and the best way is, I mean, as you pointed out, is to give them, hygiene advice and pretty much then ensuring that the SOPs are fulfilled. Cricket has returned today, right? And while I do understand that your work has primarily been with the football clubs and whatnot, but with regards to bringing cricket back and with regards to ensuring that cricket takes place, because it's a different ball game altogether. I mean, you have a ball which 22 players at least touch, right? And then you have the we've already heard about the saliva ban, but use of sweat is still allowed, so on and so forth. Tell me a bit about how the protocols being followed in cricket are different to the protocols that have been in place for the Premier League.
Sure. So again, being quite lucky in the sense that I've been working closely with Professor Nick Pearce, who's from the ECB, who's the head of medical at the ECB, as part of the working group. And again, we've been sharing lots of ideas on that. Now, you've got to remember, in football, we're in far more closer contact than in cricket. And in cricket, apart from the actual cricket ball itself, most players can socially distance, even on the cricket pitch. I think the main concern with regards to cricket was as you said, the transference on the actual cricket ball itself. In terms of everything else, creating a bubble, in terms of them training, the ideas and protocols are probably similar, so that they've created a safe environment so that only players and staff who have been tested are allowed in that environment. And then the other aspect is that they get tested, as I said, twice a week. All the equipment is meant to be cleaned on a regular basis. So what we would have in the training, after each session, all the equipment is cleaned and sterilized. So the real problem, I suppose, in cricket would be with regards to cricket ball. We know that the virus is airborne, and we know that it's transmitted through the lungs. So there's a risk that via saliva, it could be transferred to the ball and then somebody else touches it. So that's why the saliva ban came into play.
But what about the sweat? I mean, doesn't it? I mean, can it get transferred through? So, I mean, because I'm guessing if saliva can be a carrier, then I'm guessing all bodily fluids would
So
probably.
so you're right to question it. Initially, we didn't know, but what it appears to be is that so the reason it goes through the saliva is because obviously it comes from the oral route, and so the virus actually enters the body and is transmitted via the mouth or the nose. And so that's the reason why people use masks and stuff. So in terms of sweat, as far as we know, it's not transmitted anywhere near to the levels that it is with regards to saliva. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then the other thing is that what you've got to try and stop doing, and it is very difficult, even if you're touching the ball, if there is a small chance that somehow the virus had been transmitted to it. So don't forget, all the players have been tested. They're meant to be in a clean environment. They're meant to have a regular symptom check. So the chances of a virus actually landing on the ball in the first place is going to be very, very slim anyway. And then even if it is, there's going to be things like they'll clean the ball and they'll change the ball on a regular basis.
I mean, if we go by that logic, then frankly speaking, someone who's gone through multiple tests and multiple surveillance and has been given a clean sheet, his saliva should also be fine. I mean, then saliva ban.
It should be. It should be, but the thing is that we know that's the route that is most likely to be transmitted via that route.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So what it is to try and reassure people, why take that risk? At this moment in time, the options are, okay, either we have no sport or we have sport with changes made. Now, I understand that, the saliva aspect is a big issue with regards to, making the ball swing or keeping one side shiny. I respect that. But at the same time, every sport has had to make changes to make it as safe as possible. So, for example, in our sport, we're having drinks break halfway through, each half.
5 substitutions.
So it's a new way. It's a new way of working and living. Look how the substitutes are. We're all separated. So unfortunately, until we get enough evidence, until we get this disease under control, this is how we're going to have to function and work. And I think, the fact that we're not having to use the saliva, I think it's a small price to pay even if we can get cricket to return. If there are alternative ways that we can use it.
Fair enough. Nabeel, by the way, for those who are tuning in, Nabeel has had some technical issues. That is why Nabeel couldn't be a part of this conversation earlier. But Nabeel, I believe we do have Nabeel, especially with his extremely dashing profile picture there. Nabeel has a question. Yes, Nabeel.
First of all, apology for my profile picture.
No, it's pretty dashing, man. I mean, you can probably get a date or two. I mean, of course, Bhabhi needs to not know about it, but yes, go on.
That definitely. Otherwise, I would have to seek asylum either in your home or at Dr. Zaf's place. Achha, otherwise, I don't know whether you have asked about Liverpool or not, so because I wanted to talk about it.
No, we haven't discussed anything. We've just been focusing primarily right now on these questions pertaining to COVID, so on and so forth. But yes, let's take the conversation further. Go ahead.
Because when I talked about Liverpool, there was this big smile on Dr. Saab's face. Dr. Saab, you have been part of, Liverpool getting through stages to now where they are. Because I believe you were there when Brendan Rodgers was there. And you guys very closely missed out on the title. Now that Liverpool have won the title, you are still at Crystal Palace, but your heart must be with Liverpool. So how's the feeling there?
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna. Everyone knows. So even when I worked at Tottenham Hotspur, and when I've been at Crystal Palace, everyone knows that I'm a Liverpool fan. I'm now a Crystal Palace fan because ultimately, at the end of the day, they pay the wages, they put the food on the table. So it'd be very disrespectful for me to not be following this team and wanting them to do well. But I've never hidden the fact that I'm a Liverpool fan, and alhamdulillah, I was very fortunate to have worked there for 5 seasons. You mentioned with regards to Brendan Rodgers, but of course, one of the, I don't have many heroes, but I was very fortunate to work with both Steven Gerrard and obviously the Kenny Dalglish as well as other players. So I had a fantastic time there. It was a shame that we didn't manage to win the title in 2014. I hope nobody brings up
The
why.
slip, the
Yes.
slip.
And
I hope you realize by asking us not to bring it up. I
yeah,
mean,
no,
it was
no,
bound to happen. Yeah.
I'm over it. No, I'm not. But what I was really happy with was Jordan Henderson. I was very fortunate to have worked with him for 4 seasons there, and what an absolute professional guy he was. He got a lot of stick from lots of people, uh, lots of Liverpool fans who thought that he certainly wasn't fit or worthy of firstly being a Liverpool player or being a captain, and I'm really, really happy for him because not that he will ever say it, but he's proved that a lot of people wrong. Not least Sir Alex Ferguson, who said that he couldn't run properly. I mean, if you consider what he's been through, and 9 years later, after signing for Liverpool, he's won practically everything there is at the domestic level. And that really is a testament to not only is he a great person, but an unbelievable professional. And he really is an example of what other footballers should be like in terms of when he steps onto that pitch, the way he conducts himself off the pitch. Uh, you can't but like the guy. He really is, a superb professional, and I'm really, really happy for him. In terms of Liverpool winning, there was only one other player that I know that I worked with, Dejan Lovren, who was also an excellent guy as well. Most of the other players have moved on that I've worked with. I know still a lot of the staff, and I keep in contact with them, but it was long overdue. It was a shame. I'm not going to lie. It was a shame. I would love to have been part of it while I was there. But at the same time, as a Liverpool fan, I was very, very happy that they won it, and nobody can doubt that they've provided the best football in the last 2 seasons, and certainly this season they've smashed everyone. Both, yes, they may have lost, against Atletico Madrid, but in the last 2 seasons, for me, they've provided the most exciting football.
Yeah, and you mentioned Henderson, and you also mentioned Lovren. What makes this sweet for them is the fact that I think a couple of times the Liverpool management tried to ship them out. I mean, when you look at it from that perspective, and it's sort of like things that happened at Juventus under Capello, right? I mean, you had Capello coming out and saying to the management that I can't particularly work with Del Piero, or he's not in my plans. Yet, obviously, the fact that he stuck around and the kind of the kind of presence that he had there, it was pretty. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say that Henderson comes anywhere close to Del Piero. Come on, Del Piero for me is a god, but for Henderson, I think it was sweeter the fact that despite him being pushed out on a couple of occasions, then him being the captain when they lifted the Champions League, and of course every single thing, especially the Premier League, must have been sweeter.
Yeah, look, he's not out to prove. I had a chat with him when we last met up. He's not out to prove anything to anyone else other than himself. He sets his own standards, and he's a very humble and down to earth guy, and that's what makes it even more, as I say, not only special, but I'm buzzing off that, the fact that someone like him has been able to achieve all that, because I've been able to see how hard that guy works, and what a good professional he is. And I'm not going to make any comment in terms of whether he was going to be shipped on or not. But ultimately, it's been absolutely fantastic to have seen him perform at the highest stage. Nobody can doubt that he deserves to be there now. And even if he's not going to say it, I will say it. He's proved a lot of people wrong, and good on him.
Yeah, good on him. Good on him. Nabeel.
Dr. Zaf, one player I would like to particularly talk about is Steven Gerrard. Obviously, if one player deserved to win a Premier League title for Liverpool, or let's say two players, that would be Jamie Carragher and Steven Gerrard. How, let's say, disheartening it was for him and for you to see the team slip up, being so close to the title.
The key
Would you
word
be
being slip up again.
Yeah. So here's me.
slip up as a team?
Acha, very good. So here I am. I've just about finished my counseling session, trying to forget that, and at a every available opportunity, you're trying to bring up the trauma again.
Of course.
You never when I agreed to do this, you never mentioned that okay, we're going to bring up the slip up. This will be a nice straightforward question. You wait till we
Trust
laugh.
me, my intention was to make this as informational and educational as possible,
Exactly.
pertaining to the
Doctor,
medical side of things.
And
But I mean,
that's why he's hiding behind this. What is he? Is he a Bollywood star there or something that he's made himself?
I don't know. So, true story. A fan sent him this. So you need to understand that he's already reached that persona where he has fans sending him such things.
Yeah.
So yes, so he's hiding behind all of that.
No,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Then he waits till I'm live on live TV or live recording, and then grips me with the traumatic question. What can I say?
Doctor, you know what? Doctor,
but you need to understand he's a United fan. I mean, what were you expecting?
I know exactly where he's coming from.
Also, Doctor, you need to understand that in Pakistan, Liverpool and Manchester United, in terms of Premier League clubs, they have the biggest they have the biggest following, and I'm sure
it's everywhere the same. Doesn't matter where you go in the world. I can assure you, it still is the same. Everybody can talk about Man City. Everybody can talk about Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham Hotspur. I worked at Tottenham Hotspur. We used to go abroad. We used to go to Australia. 95,000 at the MCG. All Liverpool fans. Right?
Wow.
We've been in Asia, and when you see the fans turning up at the stadiums, they can't even speak English yet. They're all singing the Liverpool songs in Scouse. You know, the whole stadium is full. You see little kids. I remember in 2013, you see little kids, 2-3-year-olds with Liverpool shirts. And I'm like, why are these guys not supporting City? The two biggest clubs from the English Premier League are still Liverpool and Manchester United. And despite all the success of City and Chelsea, they're nowhere near that level in terms of worldwide support. So I hear what you're saying. You carry on being bitter about Liverpool winning. You carry on trying to do the little digs and stuff, but no problem. I need Noshirwan and Shahid Butt on here, who are the hardcore Liverpool fans, who I'm sure you're aware of. Noshirwan, who works with Zalmi and stuff, Shahid Butt from Park Reds as well. I should let them deal with you. Actually, I don't know why I'm degrading myself down to this level of getting into an argument with a United fan. I should be a little bit more responsible and respectable. Hopefully, we can edit this. I'm not going to humor you. What do you want me to say?
My friend, it's live, and I'm enjoying.
Of course,
you know,
and I'm enjoying this.
Either way, Dr. Zaf doesn't know that my kid Alian, he's a Liverpool fan. So a father is a United fan, and my kid is a Liverpool fan.
Well, he's obviously sensible, isn't he? He must have got the brains from his mum.
Dr. Zaf, I'm sorry, I'm sort of like moving away from the topic, but I think it's a good thing that I am. The thing is, so there when these players are signed in, right, and their medicals take place and stuff like that, and sort of like as fans, you know, following the transfer market, you usually hear when someone says that, you know, this player X or Y has been signed and pending medical examination, right? So you often pretty much assume that the medical examination is a rubber stamp to the transfer being finalized. But then there have been certain instances where at the last minute a medical exam hasn't been cleared. Yes, I can understand when it's an issue pertaining to, you know, some cardiac problem or something like that. But one particular case, and I don't want to name the footballer, but I remember one player who was signed, and he failed his medical based on the examination of his gums, but he was signed by another team. So can you sort of like, as a layman, explain, to a layperson, explain why would a football club reject a footballer who they're willing to spend, say, 30 million pounds on, just on the quality of his gums?
Okay, so I'm not going to speak specifically with regards to that in terms of the so-called theory about a particular club, and I won't mention which club that was. There was a theory by a particular club, or the doctors at a particular club, that people who had issues with regards to their teeth, there may be an increased risk with regards to getting hamstring injuries. So what they claimed was, if that person had poor dentition or issues with regards to them wisdom teeth, then that may create more inflammation, and that may create an increased risk regarding hamstring issues. Listen, I've not found any evidence regarding that, and I can assure you that none of my colleagues at any of the major clubs that I have regular dealings with would not sign a player just based in terms of issues with regards to their gum. Okay, so when we do a medical on any player, and when we say fail, what basically happens is that, and you got to remember that it's not always you have a player where you have, that you're going to sign a player a week or 2 weeks in advance. Sometimes, because of the situation where one player may be signed by one club and then that frees up a space for another player, you may only find out about a player on the day. And so you then have to do a medical on the day. And what we then do is find out about their playing history, how many games they played in the last 3 seasons. Then if we have time, so my medical normally takes about 7 to 8 hours. So it involves questionnaire in terms of their playing history. We'll do a head-to-toe examination, musculoskeletal examination. We'll do a cardiac screen, which takes about an hour. So we'll get them on an exercise ECG. We'll get them in the scanner, MRI scan of all the major joints, such as ankles, knees, pelvis, lumbar spine. And then once we've got all that information, I will then do a report to the chairman and the manager and the sporting director, and I will outline the risks or any things that I've picked up, and I'll make a comment whether they will create an issue in the short term, medium term, or long term. And normally a player will be offered a contract anything between 3 to 5 years, and so then it's a judgment call as to whether any of those issues that have been highlighted are going to be a problem over the next 3 or 5 years. So when we talk about a player failing a medical, it's usually because the club and the player have not been able to agree terms. So for example, if I pick up something on a medical with a knee issue, and I say, look, I don't think this player is going to be able to give you regular performance, be available 80% of the time for the next 5 seasons. I don't think he should be offered a 5-year contract, or it's going to be an issue for you. The club may go back to the player and agent and say, we're only going to offer you a 2-year or a 3-year contract. Okay. That's when then the communication will break down, because then the player says, well, no, I want a 5-year contract. So that's usually what ends up happening. But in an ideal world, we should have, a couple of days notice. You then have a whole day with a player to do the medical. And then as long as they've been playing regularly for the last 3 seasons, usually they'll pass the medical.
Other way.
Yeah.
Dr. Zaf, I would like to talk about the Crystal Palace. I think the sort of job that you guys have done, given the start that you guys had, it's been a really good season for Crystal Palace with, say, limited resources. So in terms of managing limited resources, how difficult it is for you guys, those looking at the medical side of things, to keep those players fit, because you already have a thin squad in terms of quality. So how difficult is your job?
It is. It's a different challenge to how it was at Liverpool and Tottenham. I agree with you in terms of the resources we may not have in terms of personnel on the pitch. But alhamdulillah, I've been very fortunate at Crystal Palace. So it's a nice little project for me, in the sense that when I was approached, it was about raising the standards of the medical department here to similar standard of where we were at Liverpool and Spurs. And so that didn't require a huge amount of investment, in terms of other personnel. We brought in some other good physios, good sports scientists, and the chairman, Steve Parrish, has been excellent in the sense that any equipment that I needed, we were able to bring in. So some of the equipment that we have, we may not have, say, like Man City, have 5 or 6 of them. We may only have 2 of them, but it was making sure that our principles and the way that we work, we are using the best practice from around the world. So one of my main roles is to find out what the best practice is, and that we can provide the best care, the best standard of care, as if that player was at any other club in the world, and that's what my main aim is to do. Now, of course, recruitment is massive alongside that as well. It's very well saying we're keeping players fit. Also, it's important having the right type of players. So, I wish, there's no doubt, if I had a team of Luis Suarez's, we'd win the league, for the simple reason you wouldn't even need a doctor. That guy, in the 3.5 seasons I was at Liverpool with him, he never missed a single game due to injury. He missed plenty of games due to other reasons, which we won't go into. But, not a single game due to injury. Now, that's not to say that he didn't have injuries. He was just able to cope. And, if I was looking at developing a medical department or a team, the first thing that you're looking at is, in terms of recruitment, is recruiting the right type of players who are robust enough, who are going to be available for you. There's no point having a player who is only going to be available for you for 20% of the season, no matter how good the player is. So that is really
of course, yeah.
And it has been a challenge, because if you look at the type of squad that we have got an elderly squad. If you look at our average age, it's one of the highest in the league, which brings challenges in itself. But as I say, alhamdulillah, it's been great here, because the chairman has allowed me to get on with the job. He's allowed me to bring in the staff that I want, the equipment that I want, and put the practices in place. And I'm really not trying to, not being arrogant here, but I think if we looked at our practices, if somebody was to come in and look at our practices, they would be as good as anywhere you would find around the world, in terms of our reasoning, in terms of how we manage our injuries, and in terms of returning them back to the football pitch. And that's what our aim is. And the players recognise that, and the chairman recognises that, and that for me is quite rewarding.
Haider bhai?
Doctor, sorry, Nabeel, just a second. Dr. Zaf, we're getting a couple of questions for you as well. Some questions pertain to Pakistani players and cricket players. So, I mean, I to be honest with you, I don't think without having complete medical history, you would be in a position to address those questions. So I'm going to let go of those. But there are some very, some very general questions as well. Shahid Rahman on Facebook asks, what do you think about Pakistani food? Is it good for sports people or not?
So it all depends in terms of what do you mean by Pakistani food.
So we primarily mean biryanis and naans and halims, man. And niharis. I don't think we mean anything else. Let's be honest.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. So I have lots of players. Even when I was at Liverpool, there were players in other clubs, and even here, who do like Pakistani food. But there are healthy Pakistani foods. I know that may not be to everyone's taste, but there's nothing wrong with regards to lamb chop, grilled chicken tikka.
Who doesn't like that?
Right. So what I'm saying is, as an athlete, you can't have those things. Where you've got to be careful, and that's not to say that you have to completely avoid the biryanis and the karais, because we all like them. Football players like them as well, but it's about moderation. What is clear is that those kind of foods are not going to help you perform at the highest level. They're not going to help you recover. They're not going to help you in terms of provide the right kind of energy. And if you're not burning that off, all that will end up happening is that will be stored as excess body weight, as fat. And that, again, is not going to help you recover quickly. It's not going to help you perform on the pitch. So it's about moderation. So if you're talking about those kind of foods, biryanis and karais, those kind of foods really it's moderation, very very occasionally. But you can still have the Pakistani taste with grilled foods, grilled fish. If you're going to have something along with your salan or your kebabs, then really it should be roti, wholemeal roti. Those kinds of foods are okay, but again, in moderation. Because at the end of the day, if you're an athlete, you want to perform. What goes inside you in terms of with regard to your food is going to also help you perform, but more importantly, is going to help you recover and help with regards to injuries as well. So we play a large emphasis on that in terms of making sure that the lads, we give them good nutrition advice. We have a nutritionist who comes in on a regular basis. They all have their body fats checked. And the players know at the end of the day, if they're not performing, there's a reason why they're not performing. And it's usually as a result of them not being in the right condition.
Okay. Dr. Zaf, there are a couple of questions. There's a very there's a podcast being run by some really talented Pakistan cricket fans. It's called Change of Pace. They've asked a question. The first question pertains to some cricketers. I want to ask the doctor about continuing injuries with Pakistan's young talents, Hassan Ali, Ruman Rais, Haris Sohail. Is there an issue with how we're dealing with them? Again, as I said earlier, without having proper medical history, I don't think it would be appropriate for us to answer this query. But there is one particular question which I would want you to, if possible, indulge me with, and that's the one pertaining to other sports or even other cricket teams seem to have far quicker recovery times with fewer recurring issues. Is there any way that we can sort of like address that for the Pakistani team?
Look, I think it's difficult. Look, I don't know because although I went to Pakistan last year, I'm not privy to that information. It's all secondhand information. So I've dealt with a few different athletes from Pakistan, and so I only hear one side of the story, and usually the main issue, certainly if you look at the sports like football and squash, they don't have the facilities or they don't have the expertise, and so if you don't have that, then unfortunately when somebody does have an injury, then it's going to make it far more difficult for that person to return back to their sport. You look at we're lucky in the UK, certainly in the Premier League. If you consider how much each player is getting paid, on average, even at a club like Crystal Palace, you have some of the players that are earning over £100,000 a week. So every week's delay for that player is huge. So we have to make sure that we have to get that player back as soon as possible. So that's why the club is willing to invest in terms of the medical structure, the sports science structure. When I look at other sports in Pakistan, such as squash, football in Pakistan, judo, they don't have that infrastructure. They don't have the resources there. So unfortunately, when an athlete does get an injury, then because they haven't got that one-to-one care or that expertise, then the recovery from the injury probably will take longer, which is a shame because the thing I enjoy about this job more than anything is the opportunity to help people return back to their sport, which they love doing. And I don't think there's anything more rewarding than helping somebody get back to what they enjoy doing. And so unfortunately, I think this is throughout Pakistan, not particular one sport. There needs to be a change, not only in terms of the sports medicine setup, but also the infrastructure as well. Because when I hear from the people that play judo and squash, the kind of facilities that they have, and if I just compare with football, so I know some of the footballers that have played for the Pakistan national team and have also played in Pakistan, and then have also played in England. So I know Rehan, who obviously played in Pakistan, but he was the first Pakistani to play in the Premier League. He played for Fulham, and so I speak with him on a regular basis, and so he's able to tell me, look, the setup isn't there, the facilities aren't there. And it's the same with the Premier League footballers here that go to other countries as well. that go from the UK, and then when they go back to their national team, the setup and the facilities are just not there. So if they do get injured, then they come back to the UK to get their treatment rather than with their national teams. So
Dr. Zaf, is it a fair thing to say that maybe because of the investment in sports like football, the sports medicine pertaining to injuries regularly occurring in football is a lot more advanced compared to, say, a sport like cricket, where probably not as much has been invested into research pertaining to injuries which are specific to cricket. Is it fair to say that?
yes, I think it is. But the ECB does a lot of research, and there is, to be fair, from Australia and South Africa, there is a lot of research with regards to injury. So I also work with Kent Cricket, which is next door to us as well. And so when I compare the two, it's very sad to see where a player with the same injury, how they will be managed in cricket compared with how they will be managed in football. So we had a player in the cricket who had got an ACL injury, which is one of the main ligaments of the knee, and then you see the care and attention that is given to the footballer. So the equipment that we will have, the resources that we will have for the footballer. So even though I'm the doctor for both teams, it's blatantly obvious which player is going to get the far better care because of the resources that we have. And it's the same with regards to, if you look at sports, like for like, if you look at, and I don't want to say, but if you look at the infrastructure in terms of India and how much now it is putting into its football, in terms of its cricket, sports science and sports medicine, and other sports in terms of athletics, they've realized the importance of keeping their athletes fit, and when you do get injuries, to make sure that they get the best care possible, because we want these athletes to get back onto the field as soon as possible. It shouldn't just be that if a football player or a squash player gets injured, we forget about them and then move on to finding the next new.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, if you think a player is talented enough, you should be focusing all your resources and energy to make sure that player returns back as soon as possible. So I'll give you an example. Owen Morgan, I remember when he got an injury with his back, and he was in a press conference and he could hardly move. And I can guarantee you that he would have had somebody working on him night and day, 24 hours practically, to make sure that he was going to recover. And I think the next day he
16 sixes.
like 100 and something, whatever, against I can't remember whether it was Afghanistan or whatever. It was just last year.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Yeah, and he scored something like 160, whatever. But it, as I say, it's a difficult one, because it comes down to resources, it comes down to expertise. In England, we're lucky because we have the money, but also sports medicine is a lot more developed here. So there are a lot more sports doctors as well, lots of experienced physiotherapists, and so there's a lot more to share around, and that players can, So even at our football club, just with our first team, we have three first team full-time physios who are working with the players, pretty much constant. With other clubs in football, you will have, 5, 6 physios. Now in cricket, you may only have one physio. That's even in English cricket, you may only have one physio working with the whole team, and you're not going to tell
I,
me that.
I think that's true. That's true for all international and even franchise teams as well. One physio, that's it. I
Yeah,
mean, especially in franchise cricket, I'll be honest with you. Um, in leagues like the PSL, in leagues like the Canadian Premier League, the Caribbean Premier League, they don't even have a dedicated doctor with the team. They just have the physio and try to use the medical support that they get primarily from the league itself. So
Yeah.
so I understand. So I understand what you're talking about with regards to resources. Doctor Saab, we've already been going on for an hour now. Nabeel, you want to
Yes,
say
Adar.
something before we wind up?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Dr. Saab, to you and Crystal Palace for giving us a star like Aaron Van Bissaka. He has been simply sensational. You guys have given us a star for next 10 years. I mean, he has been phenomenal. Like also, I want to ask
Thank you for the 50
particular
million.
50 million looks
Chalo, go on anyway.
Go on, go on,
you have
Nabeel.
you have seen the rise of. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Dr. Saab, you have seen the rise of people like Gareth Bale, Raheem Sterling, Aaron Van Bissaka, not to miss him out. But you have also seen the likes of Daniel Sturridge and the Andy Carrolls and Connor Wickhams, who couldn't justify their talent because of injuries and other issues, because of particularly recurring injuries. So what happened in particular cases of Sturridge, Carroll, and Connor Wickham?
Of course, it's very difficult for me to be able to make any comments, and I wouldn't comment about individuals.
Okay.
Uh, at the end of the day, you've also got to look at it in terms of individual. As I say, if you had all players built like Luis Suarez, you wouldn't need somebody like me. You wouldn't need the figures that we have. Different players are built differently. Different players may have been unfortunate with regards to injuries, and that can have a knock-on effect. So, a player may pick up an injury early on in their career, and that may then have recurring issues later, further down the line. Other factors come into play as well. Some players can play regardless of what issues they have. Other players may not be able to. And please, I am not casting any aspirations or aspersions on any one particular individual. I'm just making a general comment.
Okay.
So people are different, and different people also respond in different ways. And so, as I say, it's a difficult one to answer in a concise answer regarding it.
Okay, Haider bhai, just before you wind up, I would like to particularly talk about Wilfred Zaha. Doctor, we all have seen his magical talent and how he's on the pitch. Uh, I would personally like to know, like, how is he off the pitch? How does he take care of himself? Is he like he trains hard? He talks to you guys as well to keep himself fit.
Look again. He's blessed in a lot of ways in the sense that if you look at him physically, he's an absolute monster, honestly. And the sad thing is that relative to other people, he doesn't have to go into the gym and pump lots of weights. Like I'd have to be in a gym, I'd have to cut out all my carbs, all my Pakistani food, and to even get 1/10 of the muscles that he has got. You know, and that guy literally, as I said, is very blessed in that sense. He's an absolute freak. Physically, genetics obviously plays a role in that. But at the same time, he's a good lad. He just wants to play football. Yes, he gets frustrated because those players that we know that are talented and like to take people on are always going to be targeting, and nobody can deny that he doesn't get targeted. If you see his legs after a game, same with regards to Suarez. I'm sure it's the same with even Hazard. When you see these players' legs after a game where they've been hacked to bits, people say, "Oh, they're just diving." He just wants to play football, and unfortunately, other teams will try whatever they want to try and stop him from playing football. But he's an excellent guy off the pitch. He does a lot for charity. He's a humble guy. He just wants to play football, and at the end of the day, there's no doubt he's a very important member of the Crystal Palace team.
Okay. Dr. Saab, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I'm not going to take more of your time. You've already given us an hour, but it was really nice talking to you. The reason why I wanted, as I said earlier, the reason why I wanted us to have this session was to address a lot of these questions people usually have pertaining to the present circumstances. Thank you for giving me the time, for giving us the time.
Not at
But
all.
I'm going to tell you right now, the next time there's a Liverpool United game, we're going to have you here before the game and then after the game as well, right? And then I'm just going to let you handle Nabeel on your own. That's it. I mean, I'm going to step out of that conversation.
That's fine. I don't think he pays. He keeps saying there's electricity cuts, but I personally feel he's probably not putting the 10p in the meter. So that's really the main issue there. But yeah, no, exactly.
And on that note,
Well, Haider bhai, I think Dr. Saab is so humble. He wouldn't, tell people what sort of effort he has put in to keep Pakistan cricket on its feet. We all know the individuals, who he has helped him up. Dr. Saab wouldn't want us to, go public, but I think he has been a great help for Pakistan cricket.
No, listen,
Dr.
I'm not going to say anything. Let me just finish that. All I can say is that I'm grateful for people like Javed Afridi and the Zalmi, for inviting me and sharing ideas. They've had a main role in terms of me having any involvement with athletes over in Pakistan. And listen, Alhamdulillah, I'm in a privileged, blessed position where I've been able to help some of the best athletes here in the UK. And it's just sad to see, people who want to play sports in Pakistan, cricket, sport, and football, and the likes of that, just to get back to playing sports. And if I can help with that, and if people want my advice, I'm there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for joining us. Thank you, Nabeel, for being a part of the show. For everyone
Thank
who
you so
tuned
much.
in, thank you so much. If you have any queries, any questions, do share them with us on Twitter or on Facebook. In the meanwhile, I would really request you all to press the subscribe button and also the notification button, and also stay tuned for future episodes of the Locker Room Show. Until next time, Khuda Hafiz.